Hey, Armand here with your forecast for the week of February 24th, 2025. Okay, so this is kind of a week of a lot of reversals, turning around. I've been thinking about this one for a long time. We begin the week with Mars. Well, February 24th is Monday. February 23rd, Sunday, and I know a lot of folks watch the forecast on the weekend before. February 23rd, Mars stations to go direct, ending his 10-week retrograde. So, anytime throughout the weekend, the 22nd, the 23rd, and certainly coming into the 24th on Monday, we had that martial energy at a kind of peak. So, let's say passions of all kinds are running really high, and yet because Mars is stopped, it is very difficult to externalize. So, what we have is let's call it a recipe. Let's call it a recipe for frustration, right? Passions run high. It could be anger, it could be sexual passion. It's running high. Passions are all of the above, any of the above. You can think of other passions. I don't have to think of that for you. Passions are running high, you see, and then we want to externalize them, and yet it's difficult to do so. Frustration builds. Some people are going to really kind of pop their cork over this. The internal pressure gets too much, and then they kind of blow up in a martial sort of way. A good alternative to that would be to try to find some way to channel your energy productively. If you're watching on Saturday, the 22nd, the moon is in Sagittarius for the early part of the day. Go for a walk, break things up, do things a little different, break out of routine a little bit. As we get to Saturday night and into Sunday, when perhaps the energy is most intense, as the moon, the Capricorn moon, opposes Mars, or gets into the position to oppose Mars, it's very likely that we can sort of channel our energy into something, you know, productive, like cleaning the garage or something along those lines. Something we're going to get a head start on your work for the coming week. That would be another, just something to channel your energy. Still in all, you want to it's a one-off deal. Okay, this isn't like it's time to really make a big change. When it comes to all the things that we say to watch out when Mars is retrograde, like starting a new job, starting a new exercise program, signing up at the gym, taking pole vaulting lessons, or I suppose pole dancing lessons for that matter, or starting a new sexual relationship in case that happens to be something that you've been, eh, you know. Anyway, use your judgment. Use your judgment. Um, don't rush out to do it right away because Mars takes a little time to get up to speed. In fact, a good rule of thumb would be to sort of hold off until, maybe about a week after Mars goes direct, just in time for Venus to station retrograde. So, depends what it is you're thinking about putting on hold, but it'll certainly be a little tricky for some things. We'll talk about Venus retrograde in just a moment, and then again next week. So this Mars energy is building and it's strong. And when Mars goes direct, the first thing he's gonna well, he's not gonna do it, but as Mars goes direct, we have two really saucy aspects. Are they saucy? I don't know. I don't know. That's a good Mars word though. But Pallas Athene on Monday, Pallas Athene meets with Pluto in Aquarius. Now, Pallas Athene is the truth teller asteroid, very, very much progressively oriented, and especially in Aquarius, speaking for the people. Meeting with Pluto, who is also there to, well, not so much speak for the people as to work for or to transform the collective. So we should be getting some pretty strong messages right around Monday. Again, it's specific to Pallas Athene and Pluto in Aquarius. So we're looking at, a strong progressive, probably woman, stepping up and speaking the truth, at least the truth as she perceives it, and fired up by the martial energy, fired up by the energy of Mars. So this is, we get the extra little push, the message. I mean, Pluto provides enough of a push on his own, I suppose. We also have the very next day, which is Tuesday, We have the energy of Mercury meeting with Saturn. Here we have, you know, you better have your truth in line as best as you can. Now Mercury is in Pisces and Saturn's in Pisces, so things are a little slippery. It's not necessarily the verifiable truth that you might find in some other signs, but it's another indication of getting the story out there, getting some truth out there, getting some information out there. Uh, again, as I always say, this energy affects everybody. So don't think for a moment that it is on your side. But Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we have all of this mix of Mars energy sort of pumping up and getting everyone excited, the adrenaline and cortisol and testosterone and all the hormones are kind of running. Well, there's lots of them at the beginning of the week because of Mars station, and then Pallas Athene meets with Pluto. Mercury meets with Saturn. It looks to me very, very much like this is the kind of this is a recipe for uh, getting some hard truths out there, spoken forcefully. Let's put it. And yet, here we are coming into the Pisces New Moon, which is on February 27th. That's at 7:42 p.m. Eastern Time, if that's of any interest to you. Why don't we change the clock? No, we changed the clocks in early March. Thank God. And the Pisces new moon, it doesn't really matter much. It is a good time to let go. Something got to get said, something's got to get done. I would lean towards the early part of the week. As we get, Wednesday comes into Thursday, particularly Thursday and then Friday, the Piscean energy prevails. And although Mars is starting to get moving a little bit, and that provides a little bit of energy, I feel that more or less, the time around the Pisces new moon is really there for letting go. It's a vague term. I've cracked on the term letting go a bunch of times before, right? It's like, well, you let go, it's fine. But what does that really mean? Well, in this case, I would have to say that it really is not specific. Just let go. Don't try to do much. Don't assume that anything needs to be done. It probably doesn't. It probably doesn't need to be done. You know, um, we all need to kind of take care of ourselves. We need to get what we need to have food and clothing and shelter and all the basic needs on the bottom of the pyramid and then a little bit higher up and so on. But we don't necessarily really need to accomplish all that much. And certainly I think this week with Mars still moving a little bit slowly and the new moon in Pisces, well, a couple of days you can let things go. As we get to the weekend, the Venus retrograde becomes a little bit more apparent. I'm going to say a lot more about Venus retrograde next week when we're sort of in the midst of it. As we approach the Venus retrograde, we're starting to think about what it is we really want. And it's the Venus stations to retrograde on March 1st. We start thinking about what it is we want to do in terms of relationship, but also in terms of socializing, in terms of our aesthetics and in terms of our values and our valuables. So it's a time when we're going in and we're reconsidering these things. It is a time, the next 40 days till April 12th, a time to step away from pleasures and luxuries and indulgences, let's call it. It just doesn't go all that well with Venus retrograde. As I have mentioned frequently, when Venus is retrograde at any rate, Venus retrograde is 40 days of the planet appearing to go backwards from the perspective of the Earth. And it is this kind of going within and sort of clearing things out. And it resonates very much with there's all sorts of biblical references to the 40 days, right? There's the 40 days of the flood because God wasn't happy with his creation and decided to, well, to give it a reset. So we'll just, we'll flood everybody out. And then, the Jesus' 40 days in the desert where he was tempted by the devil. We'll hold on to that. We'll talk about more about the devil and Venus next week. And then there's the 40 days of Lent, which actually this Venus retrograde corresponds with very closely. It's almost exactly on Lent. It's, a few days, it's a little bit earlier than Lent. And what do you do on Lent? You give up something. You're supposed to give up something that you enjoy. And the general sense is that it's a time of going within, letting go of the external world for a little while, and, not indulging. And I really think that the 40 days of Lent is it's the tacking of Venus retrograde into a particular part of the calendar. I think it really is based on Venus retrograde. And they just sort of said, well, it's hard to figure out when Venus is retrograde or it happens at all different times of the year. So we'll just stick it right here. And, I mean, it is appropriate enough when you consider there was a good choice to stick it right before Easter, let's put it that way. But I think that that is very much the kind of thing we might be thinking about as we approach the next 40 days. And in the meantime, starting with this new moon, we are officially entering eclipse season because in 2 weeks we're going to have a lunar eclipse, and then 2 weeks after that we're going to have a solar eclipse, and then so we have 6 weeks of eclipse season beginning on this new moon. As you know, as I know, and I've told folks who watch before, during eclipse season, things get blown out of proportion. They look bigger than they otherwise would. They look more serious than they otherwise would. It's what they're pointing to, right? Like what you're concerned about is something to be concerned about, but it's out of proportion. It's out of proportion. Here we have the sort of mixture of eclipse season and Venus retrograde. Plus, we have Neptune at the very end of Pisces, about to go into Aries. That's another thing for March. That's March 30th. It's the very end of the month. We'll be talking about that all through. We'll talk about it sooner or later. So I'm going to be talking about it for months and stuff. We'll talk about it a little bit. It'll have its own video though. That's something. That's something. Anyways, so as we get to the weekend, the far weekend, the weekend of March 1st and 2nd, it's a good idea to kind of think about, going within. Venus is, of course, retrograding in Aries. I shouldn't say, of course. Venus is retrograding, beginning her retrograde in Aries, which is Mars' sign. Again, this is kind of knitting together. This is kind of knitting together the whole Mars and Venus thing. And not in everything in life, but in things that are Mars ruled, we've had a slow start to the year. And then in things that are Venus ruled, we're having a bit of a slow start to the year. We'll have to consider. We'll have to consider. But Venus retrograde, I mean, yes, old lovers come back and things like that. Sometimes, it happens, often to demonstrate why they are old lovers and not current lovers. But uh, really think about it as this time to step back. Think about it as a time of going in and not trying to push too hard with what's going on in the world. I do want to mention if something significant, this is backing up. I should splice it in, but I'm not gonna because it really doesn't affect that many people. But if something significant happened right around December 4th when Mars stationed to go retrograde, it may resolve right around Mars station to go direct. So right around this weekend. I would think that that would particularly affect people who are sort of Mars ruled, people Aries Sun, Aries Ascendant, Scorpio Sun, Scorpio Ascendant. Those are the signs or if you have a very prominent Mars rising, Mars on the midheaven, something along those lines, then I think that if anything happened right around December 4th and as close to the day of the station as possible, then it may resolve right now as we get to the end of the cycle. And then and the resolution doesn't mean that everything is fine. It just means you don't have to really think about it and worry about it anymore. What happened happened, and it now can sort of go into the past. A similar type of thing will happen with Venus retrograde. So if something happens that seems significant to relation, Venus ruled things like relationship, aesthetics, business dealings, finances, happens right around March 1st. Well, we could expect that we may get the resolution to that way out in April, right around April 12th. That's the way these things work. Again, that would be most relevant if you have Taurus Sun, Taurus Ascendant, Libra Sun, Libra Ascendant, or a really prominent Venus in your chart. Just to just to kind of keep that in mind if something happens. Usually we don't recognize it until afterwards. We go, oh yeah, that was a Venusian thing that happened, or that was a Martial thing that happened. Now, as Venus goes retrograde on the first, we have two aspects on the second that are really, really worth looking at. And this is shut those cell phones off, people. Um, what was I saying there? See, this is why the cell phone should be shut off so that I can not get distracted. As Venus is going retrograde and not particularly relevant to Venus going retrograde, we have a very different story than we have early in the week. Early in the week, it's Pallas Athene and Pluto and Mercury and Saturn. It's all about telling the truth. It's all about getting the truth out there. Maybe Mercury and Saturn giving a little bit of um, let's call it flexibility with the truth. Which story do we want to be looking at? But on the second, so figure, coming in here, let's say February 28th. This isn't a leap year right now. February 28th, March 1st, no, it's not a leap year, March 2nd, and going into next Monday, we are affected by Mercury conjunct Neptune. Now, if Mercury conjunct Saturn is about, hard truths being spoken, what's the bottom line? Even in Pisces, then Mercury Neptune is completely the opposite. It's like Mercury retrograde raised to a power. It is just anything goes. It's not even that people might lie, but it's more like the kind of thing like when a story is so good that you just gotta believe it. You just gotta believe it's true because it's so good. And that's Mercury Neptune. Very, very prominent coming into the weekend, but there's something else going on the weekend. I'm exhausted over here. The sun is going, I'm not exhausted. The sun is going to square Jupiter. Now, Sun squared Jupiter tends to be kind of an ego inflator. Tends to be kind of these two planets get along very, very well. It's a square, it's a tense aspect, but that really just makes it more dynamic because these planets get along really well. And the sun is in one of Jupiter's home signs. The sun's in Pisces, and so Jupiter loves that. It's really good. Anyway, the idea here is that this weekend of the 28th, 1st, 2nd, spilling over into the 3rd, very likely to have a very unrealistic but high energy. We even have the waxing moon. It's going to go through Aries and Taurus, going to hit Uranus. There's a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of energy. And then there's this sort of Mercury, Neptune nebulousness, the sun and Jupiter just sort of like take that big leap of faith. You know, it's really not great for practical stuff because the Mercury Neptune is not good for practical stuff. It's not good for communications. It's not good for talking to so don't text, don't send emails for things that should be said in person. In the case of this, it doesn't even matter. Even if you're speaking face to face or on the phone, it's not that much better. And there is a little too much ego energy showing up with the sun and Jupiter. So there's just not that kind of there's nothing there to sort of check and see, So it's a time things may come spilling out. On the collective level, no doubt we will see some folks that are quite charged up and just spilling their stuff out there and probably just just really get the smoke screen The smoke screen will be very, very strong. It's a good energy if you don't take it too seriously. It's a good energy for chilling out and having fun, and it's a good energy. It should be a nice weekend. uh, Mercury, Neptune, and Pisces, make sure, just not too nice a weekend. But it's not very good for practicality. So, I mean, however you do zone out, however it is you do sort of, take a little space, you know, there's the Pisces new moon on Thursday, then there's all this energy through the weekend. You get the idea, right? Take care of the stuff that's got to be done early in the week, right around February 24th, even though, some stops and starts with Mars just getting moving. But it's the better energy if you got something to do. And then after midweek, it's kind of time to chill out and not take things all that seriously. You know what? You shouldn't take things all that seriously if you can possibly avoid it at any time.